Um, all right. So here at Facebook, we want to build community and reach the people that you care about. So today we're really going to highlight Facebook's mission of giving people the power to build community and bring the world closer together in context of giving candidates and communities and organizations opportunities to do that through our platforms. In particular, and today we're focusing on paid media and how that is a very powerful tool for us to use. And how to, amplify it on the work you're already doing on Facebook and putting a few dollars behind your work can do. Next slide. So people have become more and more accustomed to tailored, relevant experiences, and that also extends to the ads that you see. Advertising, which is powered by data, which is at the heart of probably what all of you are doing at your organizations or campaigns. It's certainly what we're doing over here. Lets billions of people who are online experience messages from organizations all around the world. So currently there are over 4.5 billion active internet users on the internet, the web, but no two people exactly care about those same things. So we just want to make sure that we can highlight these really important statistics about how Facebook really employs a really important piece of this here. So 2.6 billion people use Facebook every single month. 1.1 billion people are active on Instagram every month, including myself. And 1.3 billion people are using Messenger every month, and those numbers are only climbing. Next slide. Some more statistics that are more United States based. 231 million people in the United States use Facebook every month. 178 million people are using Facebook every day, and 94% of daily active users in the United States are on mobile on Facebook. So that's something to keep in mind as we're going through this presentation and as you're thinking about your creative and your strategy and how you're reaching people. I know that's true for me. It changed a little bit my habits during COVID, but I'm typically using all of our different products and tech via my phone. Next slide. Which leads me to one of our favorite products and aspects of our tools, Instagram Stories, and the rapid adoption of it through our platform. As you can see here, it has increased exponentially throughout the years, and I think it's one of the most powerful and underrated ways that progressives are utilizing their strategy, and I think it's something that we can do to make more of an impact. So I think this is something that you guys should all think about as you're thinking through your strategy. And here's some stats to back that up. So 50% of Instagram stories that are viewed are video. If you think about it, the user experience of when you're pulling out and you're capturing content, a lot of that tends to be video. 60% of stories of video posts are sound on. And I think especially if you think about making sure you have text on screen, all of that, which we'll get into best practices just generally, things to think about are these two stats that should be front of mind. And then this one is really exciting. 1 in 3 stories get a direct message. So if you think about that opportunity for engagement, it really lives here, and the stats back that up. So recently we rolled out, switching from Instagram to Facebook, we rolled out the new page experience, NPE, if you hear us use it in shorthand today. So essentially we changed this experience for, running ads and all of that as well. But, and you guys have all probably adopted this. And if you have questions, please let us know, but and please drop that in the comments. We're happy to answer. But what you should expect is it's a more simplified experience and layout. Personally, when Senator Brown, when we were thinking through his Facebook strategy 3-4 years ago, this is like the product that I dreamed about, to the point where I was almost convincing him to create a personal Facebook page, but then Facebook has heard 2018 Catherine and was like, oh, we can make this more simplified. And I'm really excited about these changes. So there are more engagement tools. It's easier to navigate between your personal profile and just general profiles and the page that you're managing. There are more insights that you can look into. And then the admin management is phenomenal. And I think that's something that we should really highlight here. And as you're experiencing it, you should take a look at that as well. Yeah, so this kind of goes through what we just talked about. You'll see that the pages now look more like a profile. It's more intuitive. It's easier to use. There's a dedicated news feed to your page, which I think is really great and will be easier to like communicate with either your supporters or potential supporters and be able to really engage with them and have that two-way conversation. And then you'll see here the navigation, how easy it is to toggle between your profile or your page. And then the last two highlight kind of the nerdy, amazing side of it for all of us who have to manage lots of pages and also report out lots of data. It's more simplified here. So highly recommend you go and check that out. And Nikki, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Thank you, Catherine. So I'm going to jump in and start talking about the ads authorization process, which I know a lot of you have probably already familiar with the process in some capacity, but I think it's always great to go over it again and just have some reminders. So the first thing I want to touch on is you want to get authorized to run SIEP ads in the United States. SIEP stands for Social Issue, Election, and Politics. Just want to pause there and emphasize that for a second. A lot of times we'll have an advocacy group that will come to us and say, I don't understand why my ad was disapproved. It's not political. It's not an election. Why do I need a disclaimer? The full policy is SIEP, Social Issues, Elections, and Politics, not just elections and politics. So just a friendly reminder there. So two things, I'm going to assume that you're starting from the ground up, which is not going to be everybody's case, but I think it's important to start from the beginning. So one, you yourself as an individual need to get authorized to run US SIEP ads. And the way you do that, it's very simple. You go to facebook.com/ID because you're going to need to submit a picture of your ID. And once you do that, we're also going to mail you a postcard with a code on it. And once you receive that postcard in the mail, we send it via USPS. You take the code and you come back to facebook.com/ID, enter that code. And that's how we know that you actually live in the United States and you're not like a foreign actor trying to meddle in elections here with some nefarious ads or anything like that. So as I just described, that process can take a couple of days. I would bake in 10 days. Don't try to do this the day before you're launching a campaign. Don't try to do this as soon as your budget gets approved because you're going to have a bad time. So definitely try to get started on this ASAP. And once you are approved, you can then begin the process of getting your page set up to run US SIEP ads, Social Issues, Elections, and Politics. And a lot of times people will use the term verified, which I'm a little uncomfortable with because it can get confused with the blue check mark as in verified. So I like to keep using the term authorized. And all that looks like is getting a disclaimer set up. So in this slide right now, it says paid for by Elizabeth, and it's somewhat cut off, but yeah, you get the gist. And you can only set that up if you did step one, which is get authorized as an individual. Once you set up that paid for by disclaimer, you can go ahead and link that to an ad account. We have on our website in our help section the list of documents you can submit to prove that your organization is indeed eligible to run US SIEP ads. But I like, if you have a candidate running, you can use the FEC flow and it'll all be written there. It's very straightforward to figure out. And sometimes you might need to update your FEC information if it is out of date, if the address you're putting in the disclaimer is out of date. But we've heard from partners that updating your FEC information is very simple and straightforward. So that shouldn't be too much of a hurdle. If you are a nonprofit running SIEP ads, in my pre-Facebook days, I found when I was in an agency, I found that using a letter from the IRS that has your EIN on it, combined with a letter from your bank that also has your EIN on it, phone number, address, making sure everything matches, nothing is out of date, that is the quickest thing to get your disclaimer approved. I wanted to preemptively flag that we do not have the capacity. Nobody at Facebook has the capacity to expedite either of these processes, whether it's you getting authorized as an individual or getting that disclaimer approved once you submitted the information. We do not have the capacity to expedite approval on that because it's directly related to the integrity of running US Siep ads. So just wanted to say that up front. But we've seen disclaimers get approved in as little as 3 hours. Officially, it can, similar to ads, it can take up to 72 hours. So again, just bake in extra time. Please don't get started with this process the day before you launch or right when your budget gets approved. Get started with this early on because you don't need to pay a coin to get any of this set up anyways. So if it turns out you don't need to get set up, at least you have this stuff done, but you're not in the reverse situation where you're ready to launch and you can't because there's a bunch of days that you need to wait. So yeah. And then just a friendly reminder that if you are running social issue ads, if you have a disclaimer on your ads, those ads will enter the ad library for 7 years. Okay, so now you're all set up to run ads. I wanted to touch on boosting posts versus running ads. I'm sure a lot of you haven't boosted a post in forever or will never do that because it feels like it just doesn't meet your needs. But I do think it's important to touch on the differences between the two. Boosting a post is easy. You can do it directly from your page. It does offer a lot fewer options compared to, say, running ads in actual Ads Manager, which offers a lot more tools. Typically, we find that it's usually like the comms team that's going to boost posts, whereas your actual, your team that's actually running ads, whether it's fundraising, list building, if you're running persuasion campaigns, they're going to be using Ads Manager, of course. I would, if there are any comms folks on the call, I would encourage you to talk to your your ads people because you might have your budget to boost posts, which is great, but a simple 5 or 10 minute conversation with your ads people could result in that those boosted posts doing a lot better, especially if they decide to run it in Ads Manager for you as opposed to you boosting the post. So definitely have those conversations internally, but I just wanted to show some of the things you're giving up if you decide to go with the ease that comes with boosting a post. Then I wanted to touch on Business Manager. If you're not familiar with Business Manager, again, going with the example of you being an org that is just starting from the ground up, the Business Manager will house your page. It will be the entity that owns your page, whether it's your candidate's page or organization's page, and it is also the entity that will house any ad account that you set up. It will also house things like your domain, because now you have to get your domain verified to run conversion ads since the iOS 14 loss of signal occurred. What else does it house? Your line of credit if you're eligible, and we'll get into that a little more into that later. So your Business Manager is really the thing that houses all your assets as an organization or a campaign. One plug that I wanted to make here is if you could please make sure that you have at least 3 admins in your Business Manager, because we're getting, as people are starting to ramp up for 2022, we're getting a ton of requests along the lines of, we usually get these from agencies. Agencies come to us, and I'm sure there's some agency folks on the call. They come to us, they're like, we have this new client, we want to start running ads for them, but we can't because they no longer have access to the Business Manager that owns the page. This usually happens because there was only one admin in the Business Manager that owns the page, and that person is doing something completely different, is no longer in the DC industry, as I like to call it. And so usually the client is kind of like, just has the agency reach out to us to try and fix it. And yes, we can fix it. I've seen that process of fixing it, so to speak, take anywhere between 2 weeks. And I'm currently dealing with a case that's going on over 2 months. So I really encourage you, if I have any agency folks on the call, but even if you're not in an agency, if you're setting up the Business Manager from scratch, please have as many admins in there as possible. Think of it as paying it forward for the next digital director, the next director of ads, whatever you want to call it, so that they don't need to go through the hassle of getting the permissions they need when it's time for the next cycle, and they want to run ads ASAP. So have as many admins there as possible, please. Quick checklist for running ads. I'll go through this super quickly. Personal Facebook accounts. One plug there. If you have please do not set up a second Facebook account just to run work stuff. So if you're at an agency or if you just joined a campaign or organization and you want to keep things separate, you can still do that by using your existing personal account. Do not set up a second personal Facebook account because that gets into impersonation and can very easily result in both accounts getting deleted. The one you set up just for work, as well as your original one. And there is no way for you to recover it because the powers that be are very strict about this rule. So please do not set up a second Facebook account just for work purposes. You will also need a Facebook page, advertiser access to the page, although with NPE it gets a little more complicated, but we can get into that later. You obviously need an ad account. One plug here is, talking to my campaign folks, my nonprofit folks, it is okay if an agency tells you that they want to run your ad program from their own ad account in their own business manager. That's totally fine. We sometimes get that question from nonprofits. It's totally okay. You can still be given access. Sorry, I just need a sip of water. Business manager, we went over that in detail. Payment method. One plug here about lines of credit. Campaigns and committees are not eligible for lines of credit. Lines of credit are very convenient. So, unfortunately, they're not available to campaigns and committees. However, if you are a campaign and using an agency to do your media buying, typically your agency will have will have a line of credit, and that's advantageous because daily spend limits daily spend limits do not apply if you're using a line of credit. Whereas if you're using a credit card in your ad account, you will be subject to daily spend limits, which I'm sure some folks know about. It can get very frustrating. A new ad account usually starts with only $25 you can spend per day, and then it slowly goes up to $50, $200. I don't remember all the grades, but if you have a line of credit, daily spend limits do not apply to that. So just a plug there for that. You need to be authorized. We talked about that, and you also need to have the approved disclaimer linked to your ad account. So now you're all set up. You set up your disclaimers. You're authorized, business manager. Everything is in order. Now let's talk about the people, how you're going to talk to the people you care about. There are 3 different kinds of audiences. The first one is what we like to call core targeting. That's going to be your location, demographics, interests, behavior, and connections. Connections is just a fancy word for people that like your page or other pages that have given you permission to target the people that like their page. The next bucket is custom audiences. This is going to be your email list or whatever list that you have that you want to upload to Facebook. It's going to be your site visitors, which it's an audience you can build by having a pixel on your website. And both of these, we refer to these as seed audiences. Think of it as like a seed you plant and then it grows. And we'll talk on the next slide into what it grows exactly. App users, not very relevant to this crowd, but it is available if you wanted it, as well as engagement. So people who are engaging with your content, your page. And so those seed audiences can be used to create what's called a lookalike audience. And just as its name implies, a lookalike audience is an audience that looks like the seed audience you uploaded. So if you uploaded a list of 10, you uploaded a list of 10,000 people, we will look at those people and try to find about 2 million more people that look like them. You can increase that to 3, 4, 5, I think all the way up to 10 million. Just know that for every million you go up, we kind of deviate a little bit from what that original seed audience looks like. But it's a great way for you to target people more broadly. I just wanted to touch on what are some placements for SIEP ads. SIEP, in case you joined late, social issue, elections, and political ads. Some placements that are unavailable to SIEP ads. For the most part, it's all of them that are not in feed. So just wanted to be transparent there. And the simple reason for that is, if you're going to run Siep ads, there needs to be a disclaimer. And if the placement, so Messenger, WhatsApp, etc., doesn't support the paid for by line, it's not going to be able to show the ads. The good news there is you don't need to worry when you're running ads about making sure that you're not paying for this, because we simply just won't run it. So feel free to, select automatic placements when you're setting up your campaign, because if you check the SIEP box when you're setting up your campaign, we just automatically won't serve it to these platforms. So you don't need to worry about that. I just wanted to let you know, because sometimes we'll also get incoming like, oh, I heard messenger ads are great. How do I get started with that? And then I have to burst people's bubble and tell them you can't do it. So just a heads up on that. Speaking of placements, I wanted to start our conversation on machine learning and liquidity. And really the theme across these 4 categories is letting our algorithm find efficiencies for you. So at the placement level, what that looks like is, I'm going to start with an example. Say you get a funder that gives your org, your campaign or whatever, 100K to reach young people. You might make the assumption that, okay, young people are on IG, so I only want to show these ads on IG stories. And we give you the option to check that box, so it will not show on Facebook, whether it's feed or mobile or whatever. But what we mean by letting the algorithm find efficiencies for you, and embracing liquidity and machine learning is, kind of letting go of your assumption, and which can very well be right, but letting go of that assumption and selecting automatic placements, because guess what? There are still young people who use Facebook, believe it or not. So do you really want to miss out on cheap impressions, cheap acquisitions on the platform just because you know for a fact that your assumption is correct? I don't think so. So definitely leverage automatic placements, and I'm sure you'll be surprised at the results you saw. I was skeptical myself prior to joining Facebook, but I definitely saw an improvement in all my campaigns when I started leveraging that. Similarly, on the audience front, there's a literal box you can check under your targeting options, which is called detailed targeting expansion. And I'm going to use an example to talk about what that is specifically. So say you're running a campaign that's targeting women between the ages of 18 and 40 in Texas who like video games. So a little bit narrow, but not to the point where it's too narrow. If you check the detailed targeting expansion, what our algorithm will do is be like, okay, you know what? Typically, people who like video games also like anime. So I'm going to use a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of budget to see how women in Texas between the ages of 18 and 40 also who like anime respond to these ads. And if the algorithm finds that they're responding well at an efficient CPA, CPM, whatever your KPI, your key performance indicator is, we will start, if you have that box, that literal box checked, we will start serving to that audience as well. And this is where we really encourage you to embrace liquidity, because if you don't have that box checked, you could be missing out on a whole universe of people that could be responding to your ads at a way more cost-effective way and results in a way more engaged email list or higher return on ad spend, whatever it is you're going for, just because you didn't check that box. So definitely try it out. From a budget standpoint, this looks like utilizing campaign budget optimization. So traditionally, back in the day, the way it would work is, you have your campaign level, your ad sets, which is where you target, and then within the ad sets, you have your creative. Traditionally, you would set the budget at the ad set level. You would say, okay, I want, random example, I want Gen Z to spend 50K, millennials 50K, Gen X 50K, boomers 50K. What we're recommending you do now is at the campaign level, just tell us that you want to spend 200K total, and let us find the efficiencies for you. Of course, I'm going to understand that there's some times where you just won't be able to do that because of how your budget is earmarked. So I'm thinking about, if you're working with a polling firm and they expect you to hit a specific group of people, a specific demographic of people, X amount of times over a set amount of time. Of course, using campaign budget optimization might not be the best move for you here. But for the most part, if you're doing persuasion, if you're doing list building or even fundraising, I definitely recommend that you, excuse me, go with campaign budget optimization. Sorry. From a creative standpoint, I feel like we all do this already. So let the creative self-optimize. Definitely don't try to skew which creative gets more budget than the other. Let the algorithm figure out which creative your audience is responding to the best. The one thing I will say about creative is try to be, as a Black person, I like to see Black people in my ads. So think about who you're targeting and make sure that, people can see themselves in those ads. Just a plug there. Wanted to talk about the learning phase. This is pretty specific to conversion ads, but not exclusive to conversion ads. And the bottom line here is when you do launch your campaigns, give them some time to adjust and calibrate. So if you are expecting a cost per acquisition of, I don't know, $10, and 3 hours into the spend, you're seeing $20, depending on how risk averse you are, I would say don't go ahead and just turn off that campaign immediately because it's performing badly. You'd be surprised how many times I've not done that and come back a day later and see that it's now the best performing campaign, while the one that was closer to $10 or below just stayed at the same number, but is not doing nearly as well as the one I decided to give a chance. So allow the algorithm and the machine learning to calibrate and find you the best efficiencies. These are some of the ads that would cause, these are some of the edits that will cause your ad to re-enter the learning phase and reset the algorithm, so to speak, for your ads. Quite frankly, it's literally anything. So just go with the assumption that don't make any changes. Obviously, if you run a campaign and you're expecting a $10 CPA and you see a $300 CPA, definitely do what you need to do. But whenever you can, just try not to panic and start making edits immediately, hours from launching because you're not liking the results you're seeing. So just to recap some machine learning best practices: avoid frequent editing or editing too early. Avoid having too many ad sets. Didn't really touch on this, but usually having too many ad sets is a sign of you really fracturing your budget, as opposed to letting your budget, setting it at the campaign level and letting it self-optimize towards the best performing ad set. You want to limit the amount of active ads, typically no more than 6 per ad set. This also goes back to number 2. If you have too many ads within an ad set, you're kind of splintering your budget. So try to make sure you don't have too many ads in any given ad set. Opt into campaign budget optimization. We talked about that. Consider you using lowest cost bidding. I understand sometimes you're not going to want to use lowest cost bidding. If you are going to use a bid cap, just keep a close eye on it, because sometimes we find that people could be having campaigns that are performing much better, but they have a bid cap, and so they're not. So nothing wrong with using a bid cap or not using lowest cost bidding, but just keep an eye on things if that's not the case. Use automatic placements, and as always, broad parameters work best. Going back to the example of women 18 to 40 in Texas that like video games, you could also add that like anime. That's fine. I would not recommend doing people that segment that likes video games and likes anime. I would say likes video games or likes anime, because that's still broad. If you narrow it, that's gonna really kind of tank the performance of your ads, because it's way too narrow. Next, I wanted us to take a look at how we view the marketing funnel. If you're not familiar with this concept, just kind of describes the different types of campaigns you're able to run. And this isn't applicable to just Facebook, even though some of these goals are, the way we call them are Facebook specific. But top of the funnel is awareness. So the way I like to explain this is basically just giving your target audience an awareness of your organization, of your campaign, your candidate, basically just saying, hey, we exist, or hey, we care about this issue. So this is definitely going to be where your persuasion campaigns live. Then there's engagement, which could be traffic, video views, etc. Followed by commitment. We have lead generation here in commitment. I wouldn't fault you for putting lead gen under action, especially in the new age of iOS 14 loss of signal. Some people are resorting to lead gen as a way to remedy that loss of signal and keep people on site for list building. So just something to keep in mind. This is how we view the funnel. And then, of course, conversion at the bottom. Conversion is anything where somebody's filling in a form on your website. So whether it's to volunteer, whether it's to sign up for your email list, or even donate. Increasing awareness within your community. Pretty straightforward. Reach is going to be your best bet here, but it's not limited to reach. It's kind of on up to you and your ads team or your agency to decide. The definition here is use it if your goal is to show your ads to the maximum amount of people. One question we still get is, why wouldn't I want to show my ads to the maximum amount of people? That just makes sense. True, but again, going back to the machine learning and algorithm, our system actually knows who is more likely to take action. So there will be some cases if you're in these bottom funnel campaigns, if you want to drive action, signing up for a form, email list, volunteer, donate, you're going to want to optimize for something that is not reach, because here the goal is not to show it to a maximum amount of people, but it's to show the ad to a maximum amount of people that are likely to convert. But we'll get into that later. Engaging your community. So that's starting to get to mid-funnel. It can consist of sending people off of Facebook to your website. And that's where they can learn more about your organization, your candidate. It can be engagement, so getting them to react to your posts. It can be video views, watching your videos, whether it's a campaign launch video or whatever it is, whatever big push or moment your organization is having. And then I'm not going to go over messages because it's not generally available to Siep advertisers. One thing that's great for engagement is polling ads. I still find polling ads very novel. Anytime they pop up in my feed, I always partake in them because I think it's fun. It's kind of like when your friends post a poll ad on Instagram stories. So if your organization or candidate is not utilizing this, definitely use it, because it's still, I would say it's still very novel and not something people are using much. So definitely capitalize on that. Growing your community. So now we're going into the more of like the take action. From the marketing funnel perspective, we call it commitment. But as I mentioned earlier, I wouldn't fault you for putting lead generation into the super low funnel, super low part of the funnel, which is action. Just in case you're not familiar with what lead generation is, another term people use is lead gen. And what it is, it's a form that shows if somebody in your target audience taps on the ad, instead of being taken off Facebook to your sign up form or donation form, whatever that is, instead it's just a pop up on Facebook that will pre-populate with their information. Since we already have it, you can choose on the back end which form fields you care about. So first name, last name, email, zip, whatever. And then it spits out a CSV, an Excel file of signups. So that's what lead gen is. And so that's why I say I wouldn't fault you for putting this in the action and conversion part, because at the end of the day, it's an action people are taking. But if these slides are kind of adapted from a sales perspective, and from a sales perspective, lead gen is usually considered not fully a conversion or an action funnel objective. Now going into actual conversions. Again, I know I sound like a broken record, but you could put lead gen in here. And conversions, as we talked about, it's literally just people signing up on a form or taking a concrete action like signing up to volunteer, donating, anything like that, signing up for your email list. Crucial to conversion campaigns is the Facebook pixel. All it is that it's a line of code that sits on your website. And it allows Facebook to see, as a result of ads, who came to your website, what page did they come to, how long did they stay there, what action did they take, and depending on how advanced you set this up, if let's say it's a donation form, it can also see how much they donated, and then feed that back to Ads Manager. And then it can even tell Ads Manager and the algorithm that, okay, this person that just donated $1,000 as opposed to everybody else donating $20, if we can find more people like them that respond well to these types of action, let's show the ads to them. Of course, I know ever since Apple started enforcing authorization to track on iOS 14, there has been significant loss of signal using the Facebook pixel. So I want to acknowledge that. That being said, the only thing worse than loss of signal is no signal at all. So one major plug here, if you're starting from the ground up, do not let anyone tell you that you do not need to set up the pixel, or you do not need to have the pixel set up on your campaigns, because that is not accurate. You're definitely leaving money on the table, for lack of a better term, because your campaigns are not going to perform as well if you have zero signal. So yeah, definitely set up the Facebook pixel. going into some creative considerations, I just wanted to show this ad because I think it's a really nice little mock-up. It's simple. I think, I'm old enough to remember when Facebook had the 20% rule of text that I used to find very frustrating. Facebook got rid of it, but ultimately, I think it's important to keep your ads very clear, have some negative space, have a focal point, and not make it too busy. So just wanted to show that. Some best practices for creating a simple but powerful photo ad: use the rule of thirds, try different angles, shoot for a mobile audience. This goes back to the metric that Catherine shared earlier. 94% of people are on mobile, so you definitely want to shoot for a mobile audience. Remember, less text is more, have a single focal point, maintain visual consistency, and experiment with visuals. Another plug we wanted to make is that campaigns with mixed format assets drive better performance. All this means is that if, let's say, you did an A/B test where you had a campaign, one ad set had just an image, one ad set had just a video, and a third ad set had both, we found with an 86% level of confidence that third ad set would outperform the other two. So just something to keep in mind as you're putting your creative and your campaigns together and prepping for them. So speaking of ads, let's talk about ads. Some best practices: design for sound off, because we found that adding caption increases view duration by an average of 12%. It's not just an accessibility thing. Think about people that if you're in public and you don't have your headphones or you don't feel like pulling them out, but you still want to enjoy the content, but you also want to be mindful of your surroundings and not be loud on public transportation or whatever. If you have captions on your video, the person can still enjoy the content even though there's no sound. Keep them short. I understand, especially if you have like a candidate announcing, there's going to be that first campaign video that's like super long. It's like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, sometimes more. But definitely budget to have your videographer or your agency that's doing the video make shorter cuts of said video. 15 seconds is ideal. I used to recommend also having a 6-second and a 30-second in addition to the 15-second. It just allows for if you're running video ads, it allows for them to scale better because we can run them on more placements. And the good news is those three numbers, 6-second, 15-second, and 30-second, are also the same lengths that other video platform advertisers use. So yeah, highlight your brand early and often. I'm going to get a little bit more into detail on that in a couple slides, and then use vertical or square video. Self-explanatory. I know that video is very expensive compared to, say, putting a static ad together. So I wanted to highlight a feature inside Ads Manager where you can kind of like get a sort of like a Ken Burns effect going on, have a transition with text. And all it is it's a way for campaigns or organizations that don't quite have the funds right away to, hire a fancy videographer or agency. It's a way to add some motion to your creative and stand out from, say, just a static ad. So I just wanted to highlight that. Also a reminder that branded content is something that is available to political and, nonprofit or advertisers. The good news is, so all it is you can have an influencer in your community or that's relevant to your message, tag your organization and content. And you don't need to worry about just anybody being able to tag you for branded content. You first need to approve them in your page settings. And then we're getting really close to the end here, but I wanted to touch on the 5 creative considerations we think of here at Facebook. One is be upfront with the problem. One good example of that is go back to that 15-second video I was talking about earlier. Do not waste the first 5 seconds of your video with, some fancy animation of your organization or candidate's logo because you like it. That is not a good. It is not a good use of precious seconds when you have short ads like this. So be upfront with the problem. Number 2 is show that there is a solution and make it specific and tangible. So in this case, this example on the right here. It's a fictional org that's talking about our oceans drowning in plastic. If I live in a landlocked country or state, it's 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. I don't. It feels completely out of reach for me to make a difference. So try to offer me a bite-sized way to make a difference. And that ties into number 3. Make it easy for me to take action. So whether you're sending me off-site to make a quick donation, whether you're keeping me on Facebook by making me sign up a lead form to receive more information on how I can make a difference. Those are all ways that you can ease your target audience into the action. Number 4 is the cause is the hero. This kind of goes back up to number 1. I'm sure you all have great leaders in your organization, a great candidate, but sometimes the cause or the issue you want to talk about should be more prominent than them. So definitely let the cause shine. And last but not least, share the mic. All this means is sometimes your organization or your candidate might not be the best person positioned to speak on an issue. So think about who are some people that you could invite, whether it's through a branded collaboration or directly through your candidate or organization's page, to speak on an issue that you want to tackle. Because sometimes you directly might not be the best person to speak on an issue. So just something to think about. And so that's it. We're at the end of the presentation. I did want to highlight our GPAC, which is our Government Politics Advocacy Concierge Service. It's now known as GPNC because we used to be GPA, Government Politics Advocacy. Now it's Government Politics Nonprofit. And it's very simple. You just go to /GPA/help. As long as you're an admin on the asset you're reaching out about, so whether that's a page or an ad account, they're able to very expertly handle all these things on the right-hand side, all these bullets and more. So, ad account disables, if you're running ads that don't require a disclaimer, but the system is somehow flagging them as needing a disclaimer, we know those are realities of running ads on the platform, so they can help with that. Verified badge requests, all kinds of things. If you lost your method of two-factor authentication and would like to get that reset, they can help with that as well. So again, I would keep this link very close and utilize it anytime you run into issues like this. And that's it. Thank you. So at this point, I think we're ready to take questions. If there are any, I'm not seeing any in the chat, but I'm hoping I'm seeing the full chat. The last message I'm seeing is from Carolyn. But I don't know if there are any questions for us. We'd be happy to answer them. If not, I can try to think of some things. Whenever you do reach out to GPAC or to Carolyn, not to Carolyn, to Catherine or myself, please be sure to include any relevant ad account IDs, page IDs, your user ID. If you don't know your user ID, that's fine. You can include the URL to your profile and we can pull it from that. Especially if you're sending a long list of ad IDs that have issues, don't send us a screenshot. Please send them in text so we can copy paste them. Makes our lives easier. But yeah, have a question from Alex Kennedy. How important is Cappy for advocacy advertisers? It is important. I think it's very important that organizations implement Cappy as soon as they can. One thing I want to dispel, because I did get a lot of incoming on that, is some folks were under the impression that Cappy is, and sorry, if you don't know what Cappy is the conversions API. And so it does help remedy loss of signal, but it does not solve it completely. It's not a replacement for the pixel. And if you do implement Cappy, you still want to keep your pixel, because again, it's all about signal resilience. So it's not substituting or getting rid of, but it does not solve, if you go through the trouble of implementing Cappy, it does not solve the loss of signal that occurred from iOS 14 vis-a-vis the pixel. So yes, it is important, not just for advocacy advertisers, but for all advertisers. We're about to send our product updates, and so you will see that we just recently released a way to implement Cappy in-house. It's pretty simple. You will need to create an Amazon AWS account for the hosting. It's not as simple as throwing a line of code into your website's header, the way placing the pixel was a couple years back. But it is a way for you to avoid having to go to a super fancy agency or hiring a very expensive developer to implement Cappy. And the other thing to know is that Cappy is only going to perform as well as it's installed and as well as your website is coded out. So those are just some things to keep in mind. But to answer Alex's question, it is very important, not just for advocacy advertisers, but for all advertisers, especially as more and more browsers shift to giving users the option to opt out of being tracked. So yeah, you want to be as signal resilient as possible. But again, I do want to caveat that it's not going to fix everything. It's not your silver bullet to solve for the loss of signal happening with the Pixel on iOS 14. I think you're on mute, Catherine.
Oh, I am muted myself. I can't remember if you said this at the beginning, but did you talk about what you oversee versus what I oversee?
No, you should go ahead and do that. Bless you.
Thank you. Of course, when I start speaking, I have to sneeze. So the division of labor on the progressive side over here is that Nikki oversees, and tell me if this needs expansion, progressive groups. And what would that include, Nikki?
Advocacy groups, really.
Yeah.
It's really just that.
And then I oversee any progressive federal electeds, so anything in the House, Congress, etc. And then some larger orgs like the DNC, DS. So I am your point of contact for that.
I think for my old school folks here, Catherine is your new Jen Nadeau-Helm, and I am your new Lexi Fight. I don't know if any of those names are familiar, but that's basically how it is.
That is exactly how I could have just said that.
We both have some ginormous shoes to fill.
We do.
Yeah, bear with us as we're still onboarding, if you do reach out. I'm trying to think of anything else, any best practices. I talked about the business manager not having the assets, having as many admins in there as possible. What is another common thing? Let me look at my inbox. What did I deal with today? So many things.
Something we get a lot is about text in graphics or in video. And I think you touched on this, but just a reminder that rule no longer applies, although we would say it's like a best practice to have less than 20% text on screen, but it's not like the algorithm will ding you on that as it was a few years ago.
I would like to go back to the authorization to run US Siep ads, social issue, elections, and politics. When you set up a disclaimer, that's great. You set up your disclaimer. I would encourage you to have somebody co-own the disclaimer. Actually, multiple page admins can own that disclaimer. And this is great because say I'm the only person who sets up the disclaimer so that the page can run Siep ads. If I get fired, leave the organization, or for some reason somebody accidentally revokes my admin status, the ads will go down because the ads are tied to that disclaimer. So I guess my recommendation here using this example is have somebody else at your org. In this case, I would ask Catherine to co-own the disclaimer with me so that should something happen to my admin status, should my authorization get revoked because I wasn't, that's another plug I'll make, should my authorization expire, because Catherine is a co-manager of the disclaimer, the ads will not go down. So if you set up a disclaimer, definitely have as many, at least 2 or 3 other people on the disclaimer so you can avoid that issue. Which reminds me, if this is especially for any of my agency folks, but also applies to anybody else, just go to facebook.com/ID, see what's up with your authorization, because we do send out an email, but we've had reports of them sometimes going to spam, the email saying it's about to expire. We also send a notification to your device, but if you're anything like me, I've only been in this space for 7 years and I get a trillion notifications from pages I'm still an admin on. So it can easily get lost. So if if you touch your advertising program in any kind of capacity, I highly recommend going to facebook.com/ID and making sure that you're all set there. If you aren't, it takes all of 5 minutes to get started with whatever it is you need to get authorized, and it's 5 minutes that you'll be happy you invested, as opposed to when it's time to run stuff and you're not authorized, or you're in the thick of cycle and your authorization expires right in the thick of cycle. and you email one of us to expedite, and as we said earlier, we're unable to expedite or provide an exception. So yeah, that's one plug there. Trying to think anything else. Not seeing any other questions.
One plug I'll make, because it is something that is top of mind over the last few days, I would just triple check also how you're paying for your ads and what the backup payment is for running your any of your paid media. You just don't want like a previous client or a previous employer's card to be on there and it accidentally charges, as it's quite a difficult process to go through to make any changes there. So I would just triple check your ID, triple check how you're paying for your ads. And I would also, if you have clients, consider talking with them about, or if you're on a campaign, talking with your ops person on how you want to approach all of your spend through this cycle.
I said I'd touch on NPE a little bit. One thing one little glitch that's happening with new page experiences right now, pages that have experienced that have transitioned to the new page experience. And again, this has happened to some pages. It's not a widespread thing. But if you previously, and really talking to my agency folks here, if your agency previously had partner access to your client's business manager, which has the page, etc., blah blah blah. The permissions don't really transfer well because they're not one-to-one equal. So it might be a situation where if that relationship doesn't already exist and you're onboarding a new client, right now, while our engineering team is still figuring out some stuff on the back end for new page experience, agency folks, what I would do is have your client add one or two of you to the page as admins directly, as opposed to through partner access, because that will help you set up disclaimers and such. So that is one thing I wanted to give a heads up, because it has caused some frustration, very well placed frustration, with some of our agency peeps. So yeah.
We got a question from someone on the Netroots side, and I love this question. And Nikki, I don't think we've ever discussed it between the two of us, but does it make sense to hire a Facebook ad consultant or do it yourself? Nikki, what do you think?
It depends on your bandwidth. If you have the bandwidth, if all you're responsible for is ads, then yeah, I think you can do it yourself. There's some things that you just kind of need to have experience on when running ads. The short answer is you can. If you can afford it, definitely hire an agency and have more of a supervisor role, and making sure that the money's being spent correctly, you're reaching the audiences you're wanting to reach. But if you wanted to run the program by yourself, you could. During the 2020 cycle, I was not at Facebook. I was at an organization called When We All Vote. I did all the buying by myself, and so was it a little challenging? Yes, but I really loved having all the granularity that was available to me. I was really my own boss in terms of how I was structuring the campaigns. I did the launches when I felt like doing the launches. It also meant that when launches didn't go as planned, I was on the hook for that. But it's certainly possible, it's feasible, and I do not recommend against it. But if you can have some help, somebody to kind of just run the ads, and you're because there's so many parts to it. You need to interface with the creative team. You need to interface with the data team as well, because they're most likely going to be cutting lists for you, because they themselves are working with the polling team. So it's not just a question of being given creative ad copy and launching them. There's so many other things that come with that, and you'll soon find yourself stretched thin. So if all you're doing is what we call media buying, so you're literally the person who's given a launch brief, you're told this is who you're going to target, this is the ad copy, this is the image, yeah, you can totally do it. But if you're in charge of also talking to all the other people that have an input into the campaign setup, I think you're going to find that very challenging, and you might need to hire some help, whether that's internally or it's an agency to help you.
And the other thing I'll note is from a financial perspective of, it can be more expensive to go through an agency. So there are times where you can be scrappier and have to do it in-house. I think a prime example is a couple years ago, Booker. We obviously were up against some budget constraints, and we decided to bring the majority of our advertising in-house for that very reason. So if you think about it, agencies do tend to take a cut, but not all of them. It depends on the scale of what you're doing, as Nikki said. So that is also something to keep in mind.
Yeah. I'm gonna take the pro agency route. I love the former agencies I worked at. I love the agencies. Some pros of
I
going
love
with
agencies.
Some pros of the agencies. I kind of touched. I kind of touched on this earlier. Is if, let's say, you're a campaign or a committee or whatever, you're not allowed to have a line of credit, and you have to use a credit card, which can come with constraints. If you're using an agency, you get to use their line of credit. Another thing is, I'm kind of taking off my Facebook hat here, but some agencies have preferential rates for platforms like YouTube, Spotify, and all that. So, sticking off my Facebook hat for a second, we do not give preferential rates to agencies. So, if any one of them tells you that, it's not true. But yeah, just some things to keep in mind if you're considering an agency versus not an agency. They do have some efficiencies that could, depending on whatever cut they're taking of your media spend, there's some efficiencies that could offset there.
Exactly.
So yeah, something to keep in mind. How long can you expect the target your audience phase usually take? Could you elaborate on that question? I want to make sure I understand correctly. Do you mean determining who you need to target, or do you mean letting the algorithm calibrate, find efficiencies, etc.? Defining your audience, that's really up to you and the powers that be at your organization. I've found that a lot of times it's a combination of organizational priorities. Okay, we want to go after Gen Z, and so these are the interests we're going to target on Facebook. These are the platforms on Facebook or the placements we're going to focus on, etc. But sometimes it's dictated by whoever is giving your organization or your campaign money. For whatever reason, they want to earmark that donation they're making to you towards a specific audience. So it's really up to you and your organization. Defining your audience can be as easy as saying, yeah, we're going after women in Texas that are eligible to vote, and then it's just that. Or it can get really nitty and gritty if your polling firm gets involved and your data team wants to test a bunch of stuff, and yeah, just depends. I'm trying to think. You're welcome. I can't think of anything else. I'm not in a rush to hop off, but if we don't hear from folks for another 2-3 minutes, I think we can end a little early. Happy to just hang out. Excuse me. If you ever get hacked, I think you know for a fact you were hacked, go to facebook.com/hacked. You do not need to be logged in since obviously you've been hacked. They can help with that. You can email me, but quite frankly, there's not much I can do about the hack. So definitely go to facebook.com/hacked. What else? Going through my inbox here. Disclaimers. We talked about how we can expedite those. We talked about the best forms to submit. What else can we talk about in disclaimers? I feel like those are a key thing. We talked about how you should co-own them. Yeah. we covered everything. So I think unless anybody else has a last minute question they want to drop in the chat, we can end early. But we wanted to thank everybody that did join this evening. I know it's starting to get really busy in our space, so we appreciate you taking the time, and we hope this was helpful. We want to thank everybody at Netroots, literally everybody, everybody behind the scenes, the tech teams. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to present. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. What Nikki said.
Alrighty, logging off. Last chance. Bye.